After look at the perfectly competitive equilibrium in both the short run and in the long run, we now discuss the well-being implication in the perfectly competitive markets, or say the economic welfare, social welfare implication from this kind of competitive equilibrium. To think about economic well-being, we need to first define some measures about economic well-being. The first is on the demand side. Let's think about the so-called consumer surplus. The consumer surplus is basically saying how much economic benefit, monetary benefit, the consumer can gain from a market transaction, paying the market price, but they may have a higher willingness to pay. Here in panel A, it's David's demand curve for the magazines per week. And on the demand curve, we have the value, the dollar amount, for willingness to pay by David for each magazine per week. Some people say that they are only willing to pay the market price. But here, the definition of willingness to pay is a little bit different than the market price. It's the amount a consumer would like to pay for something before the consumer see the price. So let's think about it. First of all, if you think about the demand curve, what we have said about the demand curve is that it tells us at different prices the quantity demanded by a consumer or the whole market. That's the demand curve definition. On the other hand, if you flip the same idea, you can say for different quantity the consumer would like to purchase, how much the consumer would like to pay for each additional unit. That's the willingness to pay. Again, to say this willingness to pay is different from the market price, you can think about the auctions on eBay. The seller can set a price on eBay to say, this is the price I would like to receive. But the seller can say, let's get the bids in, right? Let people bid the price. And then if somebody value more and really want to get it, they may offer a higher price than what the seller is asking for. And then a second guy may even want the item more, so the second guy put an even higher price on the item. So now you can see the price the seller is asking for will be different from the price the winner of the bid pay for it. So that's an auction, and that auction actually can reveal, in effect, people's willingness to pay can be different from the price the sellers are asking for. It's the same situation in the competitive market. So, for David, the first magazine in a week worth $5. David would like to pay $5 for a magazine to read throughout the week. And if you want to sell him a second magazine, he only would like to pay for the second magazine for $4 per week, because he perhaps has less time to enjoy it. For the third magazine, David's marginal value for it falls to $3. Now, that magazine may not be particularly interesting to David, and David probably do not have as much time as to read for the first two, to read the third one. So there's this willingness to pay. However, let's say the market price for magazines is just $3 flat. So on the first magazine, David would like to pay $5. Willingness to pay is $5. The second one, $4. And David can buy the first magazine for $3. The second one for $3. So on the first magazine, $5 minus $3, David has $2 in so-called consumer surplus. So the consumer surplus is the difference between the consumer's willingness to pay and what the consumer actually pays. For the second magazine, David got $1 in consumer surplus. His willingness to pay is $4. The price he pays is $3. For the third magazine, he's indifferent between buying it or not because there's no consumer surplus. So buying the third magazine or not, it doesn't matter as long as David has this demand curve. His willingness to pay is $5 for the first magazine, $4 for the second magazine, and he only needs to pay $3 for every magazine he buys during the week. He will get $3 in consumer surplus every week. And that is a monetary amount. It is different from utility. This is about the money people would like to pay for the goods they're purchasing. So this is actually money amount. And here, in this example, this money amount is $3. Now, when you have a smooth demand curve, or say for a market demand curve, we still consider for each unit there is a willingness to pay and a market price. So when we add up all the consumer surplus on each individual unit, we will get the blue area. This blue area below the demand curve, above the price people are actually paying for it, for this good, for this quantity from 0 to Q1, this area is the consumer surplus given this demand curve. It is a little bit easier to understand the concept of producer surplus on the supply side. The producer surplus is the amount the producer can sell a good for minus the minimum amount necessary for the producer to be willing to produce the unit that the producer is selling. That minimum amount for the producer to produce for that unit is the so-called marginal cost for the producer. So the producer surplus here is this $4 price per unit. For the first unit, the marginal cost for this producer is $1. Then the producer surplus here is $3 for the first unit. For the second unit, price still $4, marginal cost is $2. So the producer surplus for the second unit is $2. For the third unit, price still $4, marginal cost $3. The third unit producer surplus is $1. 3 plus 2 plus 1, we have $6 in total producer surplus in panel A. In panel B, we have this smooth market supply curve, which is basically the horizontal sum of all the marginal cost curves by all the firms in the market. If the market price is this P star, then for each unit, the firms can receive P star and they incur a marginal cost on this market supply curve. So again, we add the producer surplus for each additional unit, the difference between the P star and the marginal cost for producing this unit. Add them up, we will have this green area. This green area. It is the area between the market price and the market supply curve for this quantity Q star. from 0 to Q star for this whole quantity. There's an area below the market price, above the market supply curve. The green area is the producer surplus. Again, the producer surplus is clearly a monetary concept because it's the difference between a price and the cost to produce it. All these marginal costs, sum them up, you have the variable cost. The variable costs are avoidable. So if the fixed cost, say in the short run, for example, the fixed cost is unavoidable, then the difference between the producer surplus and the firm's profit is actually the fixed cost. Because the producer surplus is the total revenue, P star times Q star, minus the variable cost. The profit is the total revenue, P star times Q star, minus the variable cost, and minus the fixed cost. So the difference between the producer surplus and the profit is the fixed cost if the fixed cost is unavoidable. That is the case in the short run. In the long run, however, most of the fixed costs are avoidable, then the producer surplus equals profit. Again, as long as the fixed costs are avoidable, then the producer surplus will equal the profit. After we have learned the concept of consumer surplus and producer surplus, we can think about the total surplus, which is the sum of the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. And what we are going to show is that the competitive equilibrium, when the supply curve is the marginal cost curve for all the firms in the market, and we have this downward sloping demand curve, this demand curve and the supply curve in the perfectly competitive market give us this competitive equilibrium. We are going to show that this competitive equilibrium can give us the most total surplus. The sum of the producer surplus and the consumer surplus will be the highest level at this competitive equilibrium. Again, the basic reason is actually the supply curve in the competitive equilibrium is the marginal cost curve. Either it be the long run marginal cost or the short run marginal cost curve. In this picture, what do we see when the competitive equilibrium E1 is in place? The price is P1 and the quantity is Q1. So the consumer surplus in the competitive equilibrium will be A plus B plus C. That's the consumer surplus given price P1. And this P1 is also the marginal cost level for producing the last unit for the total of Q1, the Q1th unit. To produce the Q1th unit, it costs marginal cost of MC1, which is its price. So for the whole society, the last unit produced cost exactly how much people would pay for it. And then for the producer surplus, we see the price level at P1, and here's the supply curve. The area in between is D plus E. So the total surplus under the competitive equilibrium is the consumer surplus A plus B plus C plus the producer surplus D plus E. Then we have the total area of A plus B plus C plus D plus E. And that is the total surplus under competitive equilibrium. If for some reason, the output is reduced to Q2, then what we are going to show is that the total surplus is smaller. Simply, if the output level is at Q2, the consumer surplus is this area, the blue triangle A, and the producer surplus is B plus D, and the last total surplus is C plus E. So that C plus E gray area is called the so-called deadweight loss. The deadweight loss basically meaning it's not doing anything. It's completely unnecessary. Let me explain with more details. At the E2 level, the price is P2. So the area below the price above the supply curve for this quantity Q2 is the producer surplus, that is B plus D. And then the area below the demand curve above this market price for which consumers or the buyers pay up to this Q2 quantity is the consumer surplus, only area A. And that is the realized total surplus when the quantity is reduced from Q1 to Q2, reduced from a competitive equilibrium level. And in that situation, we have a deadweight loss. Notice that when the price is higher, the producers gain actual producer surplus B. It actually transferred from the consumer side in the competitive equilibrium A, B, C, right? Transferred from the consumer side to the producer side, this area B. But still, C and E are completely lost. Nobody gained these monetary amounts. So that is why C and E are called deadweight loss. It is the net reduction in total surplus from a loss of surplus by one group that is not offset by a gain to another group from an action that alters a market equilibrium. So here the one group that gained is the producer side, and the losing side is the consumer side. But C and E are not gained by or transferred to either side. Now, why this quantity Q2 may be lower than Q1? It can be either a tax imposed on this product, which basically drive up the marginal cost to a higher level and make the output level reduced to Q2. Or say the government set a price floor at P2. This price floor is effective because the competitive equilibrium price is P1 and P2 is above the competitive equilibrium price. So it will hold the price above the equilibrium level, prevent the price to actually fall to this equilibrium level. That is why P2 may be a price floor that is effective. Anyway, if for either tax reason or price floor reason, the output quantity is reduced to Q2, we know that we have this deadweight loss, the C plus E area. Why it is deadweight loss? Because between E2 and E1, people's valuation is above P1, above or equal to P1. So let's say E2 is $8 and P1 is $5. So there are people in the market who would like to pay somewhere between $5 and $8 for this product. And on the marginal cost curve, this supply curve here, let's say at this MC2 level, let's say it's $3. And again, MC1 is $5. And only cost the firm between $3 to $5 to produce additional quantity above Q2 until Q1. So there are people in the market who would like to pay about $5 to buy something that costs less than $5 the firms can produce, but this kind of voluntary transactions by both sides is not happening. And remember, if these kind of transactions are happening, that means this area for consumer surplus, C, will be realized. This producer surplus, some kind of profit margin, can also be realized. This is real money. The consumer surplus and the producer surplus, these amounts are real money, and they are not realized in the economy. So there is this reduction in economic welfare or economic well-being when the market price deviates from the equilibrium price, especially when the quantity is below the equilibrium quantity. It doesn't make sense really to produce above the equilibrium quantity because it will cost the firms more to produce it than people would like to pay for it. Nobody will buy the extra goods. So if the firms are actually doing that, there's also deadweight loss in the economy. But here, a typical situation that we are going to see in other markets is the output quantity is below the equilibrium level, and that produces a deadweight loss just like this. It may be because the firm has some monopoly power. They don't want to produce up to this fully competitive quantity. They limit the output to maintain a high price to maximize their profit. So in those kind of situations, there will be deadweight loss in the marketplace. Government regulation will also result in deadweight loss. We have talked about taxes and price floor. The next example is for a price ceiling. Here we have the picture for price ceiling. And the market equilibrium was at E1. This is the competitive market equilibrium where the supply meets the demand, and the competitive price level is P1, equilibrium quantity is Q1. And then let's assume that the government implement an effective price ceiling, prevent the price from going above P upper bar or going above P2. It's exactly like a ceiling to a balloon. The price is the balloon. This price ceiling prevents the balloon going to where it wants to be, that is P1 level. So this price ceiling is effective. The producers only receive P2. The result is that the quantity supplied reduced from Q1 to Q2. At this price ceiling level, P2 level, the consumers actually would like to buy QD, but there's only Q2 or QS supplied to the market. So there's excess demand of QD minus QS. Let's look at the comparison of total economic surplus. Under competitive equilibrium, we have the consumer surplus as A, B, and C. The area between P1 and below the demand curve up to this Q1, that is the consumer surplus, A and B and C. Producers receive P1 and their marginal cost is the supply curve. So the area between P1 and the supply curve up to Q1 is D plus E plus F, DEF. Then under competitive equilibrium, the total economic surplus is A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F. So that's the total surplus under competitive equilibrium. But when this effective price ceiling is implemented, part D of the producer surplus is transferred to the consumers who can buy some quantity at a lower price up to Q2. Now that the full Q1 or even the quantity they would like to buy, QD, they only can buy up to Q2. And for that quantity, the consumer surplus increased, or say they take from the producers part D of the total economic surplus. The producers only receive F because that's the area between the price ceiling level and the supply curve, this triangle F. And what's lost is C and E. The consumers lost C and the producers lost E. Nobody get C and E, exactly the same situation we have seen before for either a tax or effective price floor. That's the deadweight loss. Only one part transferred, part D of the total surplus transferred from the producers to the consumers. But still, the whole economy lost economic surplus of C and E.